All right, so welcome to How to Get a Job in Tech. So I'm Tony, so I'll be giving this presentation. So to start, I would like to present to you an easy three-step, four-step, some may say, process. Um, you can get a job in these quick and easy steps. First, you just have to get an interview, and two, you have to do well in the interview, and three, if you would like to get more jobs, you simply have to rinse and repeat. And then at the end you'll get some profit. And so while this is an extreme simplification of the process, if you really think about it, you can kind of break it up into those first two easy, like not easy, but you can break it up into those first two steps. Um, like actually getting an interview and then just doing well on the interview. But this presentation is mostly going to be covering those two aspects, um, which are very difficult. And so before we start, real quick, there's some helpful vocabulary that you should know for like if you're actually trying to look for a job in tech. So the first is an online assessment or an OA, and so this is so this is a coding challenge, and it's something that companies will give you after you send in your resume if you pass the resume screening. And so these types of problems usually involve data structures and algorithms. And you usually do them on a site called HackerRank or sometimes Code Signal, and there are others. Um, but if you're kind of if you're in like if you're trying to like talk about this type of thing with people, a lot of people will be throwing around the term OA. Um, and so you should be exposed to it. Another term is just final. So instead of just saying a final interview, people usually say final. And your power day or super day, um, so this is a day when the company schedules several interview sessions with several applicants all on the same day. So this is usually going to be your final, um, but it's just one day that's a big recruiting push, um, that companies will hold. Um, and then new grad postings. So those are just postings that are for people who are new graduates or just graduated. Um, but you'll often see that term new grad if you're looking for new grad positions, um, or on companies' careers pages. So I'm going to start out with actually getting the interview. So this is going to be step one in the process. Um, so this is kind of just like at a high level, like some good tips for getting an interview. So firstly, you can do some outreach, and that would involve actually cold emailing people and going to networking events. And so another one is going to be making sure that your job board profiles are all up to date. And it's actually um, recruiters will actually use these things like LinkedIn or Handshake. So you want to make sure that those are all up to date. And you can also do some things to actually find the jobs themselves. So outreach is mostly going to be um, like talking with like a recruiter or something, or going to events. But like, how do you actually find these jobs, or I guess how do you find these recruiters? So one thing you can do, and what's probably the most common, is using a job board like LinkedIn. Um, and you can also, for events, you can also just keep an eye open on, again, job boards. So like on Handshake, you'll be able to see a lot of different events that companies are holding, um, for UAlbany students. And um, networking too. So if you find a recruiter on a job board or at one of these networking events, um, and sometimes they'll just let you know about other jobs that you can also apply for. And then there are also online communities that are really, really good. And so some that I like to use are r slash cs majors and r slash mostly just r slash cs majors. But there's also this really good community, that has a Discord server called cscareers.dev. And so that server is literally just a cesspool of people trying to find new grad and intern positions. And so um that can be like kind of anxiety inducing in its own way, but it's a really good way to see what jobs people are applying for, and and then you can, and by just seeing what people are applying for, you can find jobs that way. The only downside of that is just that um, if you do that, those postings are probably going to be a little bit more saturated, since you're not really finding it firsthand. So we're going to talk more about finding jobs and kind of go in a bit more in depth with that. So, like I was mentioning before, you should always check about job boards. And so LinkedIn, Indeed, UAlbany Handshake, Monster, or even just Google searching are really good ways to do this. LinkedIn is obviously LinkedIn, and recruiters use that probably the most, and it's gonna have the most amount of relevant jobs that you're looking for, I would say. Indeed is a close second, and um, it's not. It probably it'll still have really good relevant search results, but it's still kind of a little bit second to LinkedIn, I would say, at least in my experience. And UAlbany Handshake is also a really good way. So UAlbany Handshake is good because these companies are specifically looking for students from UAlbany. So you can kind of, which is good because they're specifically looking for you. So it's just one way to kind of utilize your existing position as a student. Um, Monster is another job board, and it's something you can try using. The benefit for Monster is that it is the benefit is that less people use it. So the applicant pools of the jobs that you're applying for on Monster are probably going to be not as saturated, which is to your benefit because that means they're less competitive. Um, the one downside I've found with Monster is that personally I haven't really been able to find any intern or new grad positions myself. So I think with you should definitely try Monster. Um, but the postings you find on it may not necessarily be for new grads, at least in my experience. But it's definitely something you should try. And then something I've actually had decent success with is Google searching. So if you just Google search like 2022 software engineering new grad positions in uh, like Albany, New York, or it'll come up with a decent amount of results. And in particular, I would suggest looking for like this is particularly good if you're looking for or it's also good if you're just looking for other areas too, like Cambridge, Seattle, uh, and so on. But you might actually be surprised with how well just Google searching is. And Google actually has like its kind of own little job like board interface. Um, and if you start looking for postings, you'll see what I mean. But I've actually found some decent positions just by Google searching, so I would definitely recommend that too. Um, and like I was saying before, you can also look at where other people are applying, but the downside, as I said before, was just that the application might be more saturated because you can guarantee that people have already applied for it. Um, and another also good way to find jobs is to set up alerts. So you can set up alerts on LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Indeed, that will tell you that there are new positions, or you can set up positions that you're looking for, and then the service will send you a notification when a posting similar to the one that you're looking for has opened up. And I have not used this personally myself, but I know a lot of other people have had success with it. Um, and it's also a good way to keep track of, or sorry, it's a good idea to keep track of your applications, um, just for organizational purposes. So I would definitely recommend using like an Excel spreadsheet to make sure, or to keep track of what you're, to keep track of what you've applied to. Um, and then obviously go to your career fair. And I've had a lot of success with utilizing the career fair, and it is a really good opportunity to connect with somebody from a company one on one. So um, I've gotten interviews from career fairs before, and so I can't recommend it enough. So I would definitely make sure that you use it. Um, the thing you have to be you think that you have to kind of watch out for is that at a lot of career fairs, well, at a, at the U Albany Career Fair, at least virtually, there is the option for an informational meeting or a one-on-one. Definitely go to the one-on-one, and that way you can put a name to your face. And I've gotten interviews from one-on-ones, so I would go to that over the informational. But if you obviously have to go to the informational because there's no other choice, then go to the informational. But the other thing is just that these one-on-ones will fill up quick, so just make sure you're ahead of the game on that. So I was kind of mentioning before that for outreach, you might want to do some cold emailing. And so um, there's a lot of stuff surrounding cold emailing regarding like people just really aren't like comfortable with it, and it's not really um I it's even like I think it's hard to be comfortable with cold emailing, because there's it's kind of obvious that you're trying to get something, and you might feel like a little selfish by cold emailing, but recruiters have seen millions of probably sorry thousands or hundreds of cold emails, so like they know what you're looking for, and it's their job anyway to um hire people. So in a way, you're almost helping the recruiter by cold emailing, because you are saying to them that given the opportunity, I would 100%, maybe not 100%, but yes, I would take a job here. Um, it also you might also end up flattering somebody. Um, so you don't have to cold email, like, you don't have to cold email a recruiter. You can also cold email just like a software engineer that works at the company. And if that person doesn't really have like an established career yet, you might also like end up flattering that person. Um, so you don't have to be too scared about it. Um, but something to keep in mind is that the longer it takes to set something up, the more likely the person you're emailing or cold emailing will be more likely to ignore you. Um, so I'm sure some of you in the audience have gotten like cold DMs, like, or cold emails from people on LinkedIn or through email, and you either just like haven't replied to them, or you probably um you probably kind of read what they were saying, and you either didn't reply or you replied once and then not again. And so if you kind of think about it from your perspective, like, why didn't you apply? Or sometimes when you get these or sometimes when you get these cold emails or cold DMs, you're wondering to yourself, okay, why did this person specifically DM me? Um, so you should. It's good to make it clear when you're cold emailing someone or cold DMing someone that, or it's good to make clear what you want. So just be to the point. And so a lot of people are actually more willing to help you than you may think, and you really don't have anything to lose from cold emailing. You might kind of feel like it might be easy to think like, okay, if I cold email them, like, is that going to ruin my chances of getting a job if come off weird. Um, well, if you say something weird or rude, then uh, maybe. But if you're just being a friendly person, then there's nothing that can really go wrong. Um, so you might also be wondering, kind of like, how do you actually find the recruiter? So a lot of companies have a kind of standard for their email addresses. Like it could be company name and then um, the recruiter's name, or company name recruiter. Oh, sorry. So this is actually for LinkedIn. So if you go on LinkedIn and if you go on LinkedIn and you go into the search bar, you can say like you could say Google University Recruiter. So this would and that would kind of be like a job title. So or the same right here. So or you could do Google Recruiter, where recruiter or university recruiter is the job title and then the company name. So recruiter at Google. There are also these services down here. So this is a this is a very interesting way using these three services. So I have not used these, but I found these in my research when I was making these slides. So hunter.io will uh what this will do is it will find um I believe it'll find you like known emails at a certain company. And so for example, you could um oh so what sorry so what hunter.io will do is it'll show you the pattern for all the emails at a company. So for example, it'll show you like I could search in like Google and it would show me, okay, every employee at Google has an email of the type first initial, middle initial, and then full last name. Or I could type in Netflix and it would say first initial last name at netflix.com. So that's what hunter.io will do. So hunter.io is useful because you can get a general you can find an email pattern for a company. And then never bounce, what that will do is it will check to see if it's a valid email address. So what you can do is on LinkedIn you can say Google Recruiter, and then you'll get the name of a Google Recruiter. And then what you can do is you can go to hunter.io and type in Google, and it will give you the pattern for Google's email. And once you have the recruiter's name and the pattern, then you can combine the two and then go to never bounce, and then it'll tell you if that's a valid email or not. So that's that's one way of finding a recruiter's email. And then what mass apply will do is that will get you the I believe hiring manager's email for a specific role. Um, the only so that's really cool, but the only thing you have to watch out for is that if you use mass apply, you're kind of guaranteeing that their database or whatever they're using is accurate and up to date. Um, so that would be the only downside. So for example, like a hiring manager could quit like in the middle of the application season, so it's not like who knows when mass apply like updates their database. And then another thing I want to mention is just that it is constructing the subject line. So again, and you should stick to the point. So something like seeking software engineering new grad or internship at Facebook would be good. So I just want to go through a few examples of cold emails. So like what you can actually talk about. So this one is, good morning, Tony. It's nice to meet you. So you should always and you should it's good to open up with a greeting. Um, so make sure you do that. I found the software engineering role for new grads, job ID 123, on your company's career page. Can we set up a time so that I can ask you some questions about the role? Thanks, Sam. So, all right. So this is to the point, but this could potentially get into a realm of things where it ends up being like five back and forths, where you're trying to find a time, and that's not good because you're not making it easy for the recruiter. So like at this first point, you don't want to waste the person's time, and the longer it takes to set something up, the more likely it'll be that they'll ignore you. So this is not the greatest because um it's not making the best use of time. So In the next example, we have, "Hi Tony, it's nice to meet you. I'm a student majoring in computer science and will be graduating this December. I am actively seeking entry-level positions and came across the software engineering position for new grads, job ID 123, on local company's careers page. I was wondering if you'd be willing to answer some questions I had about the role for about 30 minutes. Here's a link to my calendar to set up a time. Best, Sam." So this is better because you're giving the recruiter or whoever you're emailing the a link to your calendar, and that makes it a lot easier for the recruiter to set up an email, or to set up an appointment. So the recruiter could see this first email and be like, okay, maybe I'll do it. So they give you a response and they're like, yeah, sure. What are some dates? And then you respond, and then maybe by that time after they get your response to their response, maybe they either get busy with something, or they get bored of the conversation, or they just move on to like another candidate or something. So if this one, you're being more timely and more punctual, and you're making the initiative to set up the appointment. So this is you're not really losing anything by doing something like this, and you're making it a lot easier for the recruiter. The only downside to this is that it might look like a bit of a template. So, for example, if whoops, if Tony is the recruiter's name, then that's the only like unique thing about this, and also like the job ID and the company's name. So which isn't so this can do better, but this is a lot better, but it can do better. So in example 3, "Hello Tony, it's nice to meet you. I'm a senior graduating in December and was a software engineering intern this past summer at local company. I was impressed that you've been working at some company for 5 years because I really resonate with building tools to empower others. I was wondering if you could spend 30 minutes with me going over my fit for the new grad software engineering role at some company. Here's a link to my calendar to set up a time. I also attach my resume to this email. Best, Sam." So this is a little better than the last one because um, uh, you're you're kind of making it a little bit more personalized. So let's imagine that the recruiter I'm talking to, Tony, has actually been working at this company for 5 years. Um, so then the recruiter will be able to tell that Sam has done some research and is definitely interested in this company, and that this isn't just a template, which is a really good sign. Um, so I like this one a lot better than, well, just a little bit better than example 2. The other thing I want to point out that example 3 and example 2 do better than example 1 is actually marketing yourself. So in example 1, we're just saying, "It's nice to meet you. I saw the role. Can we set up a time?" In example 2 and example 3, there's a little bit more marketing. So you're saying that you're a computer science major and will be graduating this December. And what example 3 does the best job at marketing, because we're including your background and also the resume. Um, so you're giving the recruiter a bit more. You're persuading the recruiter a bit better to actually talk with you. Um, and then example 4 is very similar to example 3. It's just being a bit more. It's a bit more bold. So whereas in example 3 we're saying, all right, can we spend like 30 minutes to talk about my fit for the role? And example 4 is, "I'd like to start the interview process for the position and sent you my resume attached. I look forward to hearing from you." So I'm not saying that 4 is better than 3, but I mean we kind of all know that when somebody's reaching out to a recruiter that they want a job. So 4 is just being a bit more bold about it, and it's definitely something you can still use. So those are just some examples of cold emails. So I hope that helps. And yeah, feel free to, if you liked any of these, feel free to use them. So I also want to talk about the recruiting timeline for summer internships and new grad positions. So it feels kind of weird, but the best thing you can do is start applying like a year in advance or almost a year in advance. So if you're applying for a position once you graduate, so say you're graduating in May of 2022, then um, positions for new grads in 2022 will open up in like the late summer, so late July or early August. And the same, so and that goes for new grad and intern application or new grad and intern positions. So not all of them are going to open up in the late summer, but a lot of them do. And then in August and September, like just applications are just going to start ramping up and more are going to open, like more and more are going to open. And in mid or late September and October, recruiters are going to start going to universities. So like at UAlbany, we have our career fairs. Like our career, well, actually, there was the business career fair was uh, to yesterday actually, and then the technology career fair is going to be next week. And in December and January, the postings are going to slow down a little bit, and then in February and May, or February through May, um, some postings are gonna pick up again, and this is a bit more common to happen for intern positions than new grad. Um, and so, for example, like we have a fall career fair at UAlbany, and we also have a spring career fair, and I'm sure the same is you can probably say the same at a lot of other colleges too. So even if you can't get a job in the fall, you still have a pretty good chance in the spring as well. It's just that the benefit of applying early in the late summer or fall is that these postings are on a rolling basis, kind of like college. So the earlier you apply, the more openings there will be, and the higher chance that you will be able to get a job. So if a company opens up with 100 openings for a certain new grad position in late summer or early fall, then maybe by the spring there will only be 50, or maybe there will only be 30 positions open. So it's in your best interest to start early because by the time you get to the spring, it'll be a lot more competitive. And if you can't get a job if you can't get an internship, there are still some other good options. So if you're still in if you're not a senior, then the best thing you can obviously do for over the summer is get an internship. And so something that companies look for is real world experience on your resume. So that's why an internship is going to be number one. Number two is going to be an undergraduate research assistantship. And so it's true that you can have a really bad internship or you could have a really good undergraduate research position. So it's just that um, most of the time, an internship is probably going to be weighed more than these other options. Um, it's totally possible though that you can get an internship and just have like in the company like just does not have like things organized very well, or they don't have like projects for the intern to work on, and you might end up feeling it was just like a waste of time. Um, and that happens to a lot of people, but um, that's why you should also consider these other options too. But I mean, 90% of the time, I would recommend an internship. Um, and so if you can't really get an internship, then you can, like I said, look for an undergraduate research assistantship. And so when you're looking for an undergraduate research assistantship, usually professors are looking for new undergrads at the end of the semester once the class is over with. So um, keep that in mind and make sure. And if it's a professor, if you're taking if you're taking that professor's class, then doing well in the class is going to really uh, make you more marketable to that professor and make them more likely to accept your request to join their group. And so I so sometimes you can request, or you can go out to the professor and ask to join their group. And sometimes what the professor will do is they will look at the top performers at their class and then invite them to their group. And so I had um that happened to a class that I was in. Um the professor that I was the professor of the class at the end of the semester uh made a list of students and then reached out to all of them and invited them to join his research group. Um, I wasn't on that list, but I asked the professor anyway if I could join. So just because you're not on that list doesn't mean you can't do it. But make sure you reach out to the professor and ask if you can join. Um, and then if it's too late to get an internship or an undergraduate research assistantship, then something else you can do is just work on a summer project for something you're interested in over the summer. So for example, if you were interested in software engineering, you could try making a full stack app. If you want to do data science or data analysis, then it might be a good idea to create a project where you visualize some data that has some narrative associated with it. And if you want to do game dev, you could try making a 2D game or a 3D game with a custom OpenGL engine, or you could use Unity. And another good option is to take summer classes to just lighten your coursework and get things out of the way. And so, um, the reason I recommend doing all these things is because they're going to improve your profile and improve things that you can speak to on your resume. So, um, when you send in a resume, um, the screener or whoever's looking at it is will obviously look at your resume for what experience you have or projects that you've worked on. Um, so just the more the merrier, and you want to just make yourself marketable to whatever you're applying to. Another good reason to work on these things is for when you actually get the if you actually get an interview. So when you're interviewing, the interviewer will ask about your past experiences, and I'll talk about that a bit later. But um, something that a lot of people will talk or ask is like, tell me about a time when you blank. And it could be like, tell me about a time when you worked on something really challenging, or tell me about a time when you worked on a team. So, working on things, and even summer projects will help you speak towards your own experiences. And the next thing I want to do is just kind of do like a little mini resume building workshop. And so when you're trying to find an interview, or after you've found a job, you obviously have to apply. And you have to send in your resume to apply. And so these are kind of my best tips for building a resume. So at the top I have did X resulting in Y as measured by Z. And so what I mean here is that um, when you're talking about your experiences on your resume, you should try to be as specific as possible and do a good job at explaining what you did and what it resulted in. So say for an example, you could say, uh, created, um, created backend service, um, resulting in uh, a 10% speed improvement. Um, and then I don't know how you'd. Sometimes I see these numbers on resumes and I don't really know how people measure them. But even if you just said like created backend service, improving uh, response time by 10%, that is still really good. And I would definitely recommend putting that on your resume. It's really sometimes it's really hard to kind of think of like a as measured by point. So don't get too caught up on that. But as long as you did X, as long as you say something like did X and this is what it's and this was the end result, that's good. Something else that's good to do is just use action verbs at the start of each bullet point on your resume, or at the start of each bullet point. Um, so what you can look up a list of action verbs or power verbs to. I believe the proper term is power verb. But you can look up a list of these and to help you, but um, you would want to say like, so an example is like, or back to my previous example. Oh, whoops. Like created backend service resulting in 10% speed improvement. Um, so created is like a pretty decent power verb or like action verb. So you don't want to say um, like backend service, or you don't want to say like, yeah, you don't want to say like backend service because that's just like a little vague. So you should say something more like created an action verb, or sorry, created a backend service. And it's good not to be vague. So my example that I gave was pretty vague. It was created a backend service, improving response time by 10%. Um, so that's really vague, and something that interviewers or whoever's looking at your resume would be interested in is like, what technologies did you use? What did you do to increase or to create that speed improvement? Um, and just like what specifically you did. So something better would be like, um, design or developed backend service in Java, um, resulting in, or sorry, designed a backend service in Java by, um, uh, by collaborating with a senior engineer and removing uh, boilerplate, or say like removing or by removing overhead processes, resulting in a 10% speed improvement. So something along the lines of that would be a lot better. Um, and I also wouldn't be too afraid to embellish yourself. So, um, for example, if you worked on like a project at an internship, but it was like at the end of the day you didn't really like get it deployed or anything, or the company, or like you didn't have time to like finish it, you should still say like developed whatever. So don't be afraid to do that. Um, and so a lot of times you'll kind of be skeptical about what you should really put on your resume. So, for example, like, should you put every technology that you've touched on your resume, or should you only put what you actually know? And at the end of the day, I would recommend just doing what you're comfortable with. Um, so I a lot of people are gonna be putting um like everything they've touched, and this kind of goes back to embellishing yourself. Um, but just know that whatever you put on your resume is going to be fair game. So if you touched C plus plus once to like try something out, it's probably not in your best interest to put C plus plus on your resume, because when you're in an interview, it's possible that somebody could give you a specific question on C plus plus, especially if the role is for specifically C plus plus. So at the end of the day, just be confident with what you're putting on it. I probably wouldn't recommend putting every technology that you've touched. It's probably better to show depth in a depth of knowledge in a technology than a very shallow breadth of knowledge. Um, and you should also always cater your resume towards the positions themselves. And the nice thing about intern or new grad positions is that they're vague. So you don't really have to worry about this a whole ton, but I'm going to be going over some examples quick. And I also have some materials at the end of the slide deck for building your resume, that I think would help. Um, and then after we go over these examples, we're going to be going over one of my old resumes, so that you can see where I went wrong. All right, so I want to go over um, a couple of postings. So we're going to open up this one. And you guys can all see my resume, or sorry, my screen still, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so this is all this is all just fluff. So we don't get to the important stuff. Well, we don't get into what you should be putting on your resume until down here. All right, so we see basic qualifications and we see preferred qualifications. So for basic qualifications, we have bachelor's degree or higher, obtained between December 2020 and August 2022. So that is literally every computer science student that goes to UAlbany. And then if we look at preferred qualifications, we have, okay, you're getting this bachelor's degree in a technical field, which we all are. You have strong analytical, quantitative problem solving and conceptual skills, which nobody's going to say they don't have. Strong interpersonal or leadership and communication skills. Nobody's going to say they don't have that. But if you have any leadership roles that you're involved with, then you should put them on your resume. And then down here, intermediate to advanced programming skills in any of these languages. So Java, Python, C, UML, JSON, JavaScript, SQL. So you can get experience with SQL, HTML, JavaScript, UML, C, Python, and Java, especially Java, just by being a student at UAlbany. So HTML would be like informatics, and then the rest you can get from computer science courses here. So this is a very vague job description or job posting. So what this means is that you can expect the applicant pool to be very you can expect there to be a lot of people in the applicant pool. But what that means for you is that you don't have to spend what it means for you is that you can use a lot of your experiences for your resume for this position. So literally any UAlbany student should apply for this, and technically you're all qualified. And so I want to show you. I'm going to show you one from Twilio. So, all right. So these are the qualifications. Pursuing a bachelor's degree. All right, we've got that. Proficient background in networking, operating systems, and security. So you can get a background in networking and operating systems just by being a student at UAlbany and by taking classes. 0 to 3 years of experience with Python, C, or Java. Again, just by being a student. Knowledge of unit testing and integration testing methodologies. This is not something that we can all get, but just because you don't have this one thing doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. And then lastly, experience with traditional RDBMS databases such as MySQL and so on. Again, just by being a student here. So this is slightly less vague, but you can still use a lot of your experiences no matter what they are for this position. So I wouldn't be afraid of applying to something like this too. And so those are 2 new grad positions. So this one from the Janelle group is also very vague. So we're looking for highly motivated individuals who are smart, hungry, and talented. That's all of us. Nobody's going to say they're not. These are some backgrounds that we have usually found are a good fit. Computer science. All right, that's us. So that's literally the whole position. So this is, again, a very vague posting. And the point I'm trying to make is just that pretty much no matter what your experiences are for intern and new grad positions, you are pretty much qualified based on these postings. And just to show, I just want to show what like a senior mid-level role would be like. So this is like when you really have to make sure that your resume is like really catered towards the position. So specifically, they want 2+ years of experience developing web, software, and mobile applications. So that's something you should speak towards on your resume. And they want experience with specifically these two or three programming languages. So Java and C Sharp, and what I don't know what J2EE is. And then specifically, they want Kafka and RabbitMQ, and specifically experience with REST APIs and so on. So, like I was saying before, just the benefit about new grad or intern positions is that they know that you don't really have too much of a specialized career yet or a specialized experience. So you can use a lot of your experiences no matter what they are. And so we're going to briefly go over some things in my old resume so that you can see where I went wrong. All right. Can you all see my resume?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, all right, um, so I want to start with the skills section. So when I was making this, it was just like pretty much me vomiting everything that I've had, um, just so I could pass the resume screener. Um, and so there's really not any structure to this. And I have a lot of technologies that I've touched, but that I don't really know about. So, for example, C++. I've used C++ once, and I thought that was enough to put on my resume. I would not really recommend that. The same with Ruby and PHP and R. Like if you ask me to do something in Ruby, PHP, and R, I could Google it and be successful, but I would not really be able to actually code it. Um, and uh, then like things like Microsoft Office 365 and Google Suite are not really necessary, and the same with Mac OS, Unix, Linux, Windows. Those aren't really necessary. Um, the 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 three lines that are actually useful to keep are these right here, and the rest is pretty much not necessary. And then looking at my experience here, um, so you're gonna notice something, and it's that like I don't really talk about any result of anything that I've done. So I just say here like studied the viability of television white space networks for internet access um, to improve emergency communications in rural areas and use Java and Python. But this is really vague, and I don't talk about like how I actually studied or what I did to do this, which is bad. And I don't talk about like any sort of like impact that this had. So this is just like really vague, and it doesn't talk about like what I actually did or what the outcome was. Um, Mined large data sets to find transmissions in to find trends in byte transmission and signal strength. So again, this is just what I did, but not really how I did it, and it's not talking about what the impact was. And then same here, just create. It's just again, it's just saying what I did, and so that's a big issue that I have with a lot of this. It's just saying what I did, not really like um, what the impact was. If you look here, I do say that I made this website, and then I talk about the impact a little bit right here. Um, so this is a lot better than what was up here. So which is good. And then right here, I just kind of have this like awkward little thing. Um, this should have just been removed because it's not really relevant. So this was me being a just like a retail person at a shoe store. Um, this is not really relevant to any technical positions that I was applying to, and I don't even have enough room to like, um, uh, I don't even have enough room to actually provide a description. So this should just not have even be like this should not have even been on it really. Um, and then you can see down here again that there's like I talk a lot about what I did, but not really like any sort of impact that I had. So those are just like some bad things that I would not recommend. Um, but yeah, and then also something else that's really bad is that this overflows onto a second page, and then I just have all this white space, and that is not something that you want. And uh, at this level in our careers, it's better to just keep everything on one page, um, because we don't really have a reason, or we don't have enough experience for it to go onto the second page, and it just kind of looks bad to just have this overflow and have all this white space. Uh, so try to condense everything onto one page. Um, but the main takeaway is that I talk about a lot about what I did, but not like what the impact was or how I did it. So try to avoid that. And all right, and so this is just a little break right here. So this is a Nyan cat, and so if you're feeling like stressed right now, I was hoping that this would make you feel better. Um, so yeah, uh, ooh woo. All right, so moving on. So now we're gonna talk about the actual interview itself. So there's gonna be a behavioral portion and a technical portion. So in the behavioral, um, they're gonna ask you about your previous technical experience mostly. Sometimes hypo like what would you do in a hypothetical situation, but in particular they're going to be asking you stuff about that actually happened. And so an example is, tell me about a time when you resolved conflict in a group, or tell me about what stacks or what technical stacks are you interested in. Um, and so the interesting thing about behavioral interviews is that they are sometimes a separate interview, um, done by a recruiter or a hiring manager, and they're also woven into technical interviews, and we'll get into that more. And then for technical interviews, um, they kind of come into a few different categories. So the most common is that you'll have to solve a data structures and algorithms focused problem, or sometimes you'll get a take home exam or like a take home project, and you have to solve something a bit more practical. So like for example, I've had a take home project where um, we get this prompt where we have to retrieve some data from a REST API, and then once we have the data, we have to like mutate it in a way, and then what we have to do is we have to send the mutated data to another REST API. And so that's like a bit more practical. Personally, I like those a lot better, because they're not like just like leak coding like all the time. It's just really annoying. Um, and it's really easy to get a problem on leak code, or like to get a data structures or algorithm problem that you just have no idea how to solve. Um, but yeah, so and these types of interviews are usually conducted by software engineers or managers. Um, and so usually, if you're applying to like depending on the company you apply for, this the path to your interview can vary. But if you're applying to a big company and even a lot of small local companies, you typically get an invitation for an OA, and then if you pass the OA, you'll have 1 to 3 interview rounds for an intern, and these are 1 to 3 technical rounds. And then you'll also have 3 to 5 interview rounds if you're going for a new grad position. Sometimes less. But and then along the way, there's going to be some sort of behavioral aspect usually. So we're going to talk a little bit more about technical and specific, mostly how to prepare for it. So there's kind of 2 different ways. There's obviously long term and then short term preparation. And the nice thing about being a computer science major is that, um, or computer engineering, is that you can prepare for technical interviews just by going to your classes. Um, so for example, we literally have a data structures and an algorithms we have courses at UAlbany, and so these are really good ways to practice for your technical. Or some even classes like computer communication networks that we offer here are also really good for practicing for your technical. So for example, um, uh, if you were noticing on that one posting from Twilio that they wanted networking knowledge, um, this networking class would be a really good way to help prepare for that. Um, Another good way is obviously side projects. So, um, say you did a side project, say you happen to do a side project on REST APIs. So REST APIs are actually not really something you learn in the computer science curriculum at UAlbany. So you really kind of have to learn that by doing some sort of side project. Then if you teach yourself REST APIs and you you happen to be you happen to get a like take home project like I did that was fetch data from a REST API and then mutate it and send it to another, then that puts you in a really good position because you know about REST APIs and you'll be a lot more comfortable. Um, uh, you'll be a lot more comfortable solving that take home project. And internships, jobs, or research groups are also great ways to prepare for technicals. Um, Again, because you're learning a lot of new things. And you can also just self study and practice leak code. Um, Leak code is very, very, very important to practice. Um, if you're going for uh, like a technical position, especially in software engineering, um, because the like all the questions that they're going to give you in your OA are going to be related to data structures and algorithms. And the questions that you get asked in technicals are also going to be data structures and algorithms related questions. So it's in your best interest to practice leak code. And I have a lot of times you'll see repeats. So, uh, for example, I there's this one leak code problem called threesome, and I have seen a very similar problem to this threesome twice on two OAs that I was given. So if you are practicing leak code, and you do threesome or any problem, there is a possibility that you would see that in an actual interview question or in an actual OA that a company gives you, which will give you an upper edge. And even in, you believe it or not, even in interviews of hiring managers will still give you questions straight from leak code. And so if you have seen that problem on leak code, then that puts you in a very, very good position. Um, and a lot. So I mentioned this community called cscareers.dev before, and they have a tool that will help you find leak code questions that have been asked by specific companies. So if you're applying for a specific company, or if you recently were given an invitation for an OA for a specific company, then you could say use this tool from this community, and you could get a list of all leak code questions that the company gave you, and you could study those to cram for your interview. And then there's a slight possibility that you could see that. And also just like there are a lot of uh, there are a lot of patterns in leak code problems that repeat themselves. Um, so for example, like using a hash map, divide and conquer, um, something called a sliding window approach, which I don't really understand. Depth first search and breadth first search, um, and double pointer, and dynamic programming. These are all things and more, but these are all things that are commonly pop up in a lot of these interview questions or coding questions. Um, and just by practicing these techniques over and over, you get a better idea of when you should use a certain one. So it's kind of like math. Um, so uh, like if you're taking like calc 2, if you're taking calc 2 and you're studying series, you have a lot of different strategies for solving series. um, so I can't I can't really recall them right now, but there are a lot of different approaches. And by using these approaches, uh, you kind of get a better knack for knowing when to use a certain one over the other. So leak code is very similar. Um, and for short term, the best thing you can kind of do is just brushing up on some concepts, and doing mock interviews with people, and also still doing more leak code. So, like I was saying, you can look up like coding problems that were asked by specific companies, and you can try to study those if you have an interview with that company's coming up. Um, and the other thing I want to mention about technicals is that a lot of times, your interviewer will ask you something um, like um, tell me about like a challenging problem that you worked on, or tell me about an interesting problem you worked on, or something like that. Um, so again, like side projects are just another really good way to prepare for technicals. Um, because when you're doing a technical, you can speak back to any side project you worked on, or any group project you've worked on at school. So it's in your best interest to make sure you do a good job in group projects. And also, by doing side projects, you'll have a lot of experiences to speak towards to questions like those in technical interviews. So technicals aren't all just coding questions, especially when you're actually interviewing with a person. They're going to ask you things about projects that you've worked on, or stuff like that. So it's not all just leak code. And so I also want to talk about the behavioral. So again, there's going to be long term and short term preparation, but I would say the line between the two is a little bit more blurred. Um, so one thing that I think is really good to do is to think about your own personal mythology. And so what I mean is to think about like just a collection of stories that you can speak towards when you're in an interview. Um, and so literally the best thing that you can do for this is just like make a list of all every project that you've worked on, um, in your computer science career. And then what you can do is like just write down like the challenges that you had for that project, what you specifically did for that project, what your role was. So even if this was like a personal project, your role was technically lead designer or like lead developer. And that's something you should mention to the interviewer. Um, and you could type out, or you could, so like I was saying, so challenges, your actual involvement, um, what technologies you used for it, and just kind of having this sort of story in your head, will help you, or a collection of stories will just help you pick good things to speak about. So it's not the case that in every project that you work on, you're gonna be working on a team and have a dispute with a coworker that you have to settle, especially if it's a personal project. So that's why it's really good to kind of think about a collection, think about all of your past experiences and have a collection of them, and then try to kind of, and then once you kind of outline these experiences, it'll be easier to kind of think about, um, what experience you should be talking about when you get asked a certain question. Um, and so when you're outlining these things, or when you're making your personal mythology, you should practice using the STAR method. And so the STAR stands for situation, task, action, results. And this is something that you should be thinking about for any interview question that you ask, or sorry, that you answer. Um, and when you're taking a behavioral, most of the time you're going to be asked a question along the lines of, tell me about a time when blank. So tell me about a time when there was a conflict with a coworker. So you could say something like, so what you would have to do is you have to explain the situation, explain what you had to do, explain what you did, and then what the results were. Um, and a lot of times the situation and task are kind of blurred together. But if somebody was asking me, tell me about a time when you had a dispute with a coworker, then I would say something like, Um, uh, all right, so I was working on a project where I had to make a bot for a the company's Slack workspace. And so one issue that we had was that we had a backend service that the bot had to connect to, and we were trying to figure out the best way for the bot to connect to the backend service. And so that would be the situation or task. Um, and then I would go on to say something like, um, and so we were trying to figure out the best way for the bot to connect to the backend service. So one thing that I thought of was that we would have a middleman that would uh, help process these events. So there would be one person, which was the bot. There would be a middleman service, and then there would be the backend service itself. And so the benefit of the middleman service would be that if we have anything else that wants to go to the backend, we would have something that was able to process it. And so actually, what I just said would still be part of the situation. And so my coworker was suggesting that we don't use the middleman service and go straight to the backend. Um, so we would be able to make the product, or we'd be able to make the bot simpler by just going to the backend service. Um, but if we wanted any other component in the system, um, it might be nice to have that middleman. So those would be the two conflicting opinions, and I guess all of that would be in the situation. And so it's the situation or the task. And so the action at hand, you could say something like, so what I did was I called for a meeting between me and the coworker, and so we discussed the pros and cons of each approach. And so, like I said before, the pro of the middleman service is that it could process anything that wanted to reach this backend service, and then a pro of excluding the middleman service is that we would be able to simplify the code for our bot, and or we would be able to simplify the system. And so what we ended up doing was we talked about the pros and cons, and then we ended up going with the solution, which was excluding the middleman service and having the bot go straight to the backend system or backend service. And in the end, we were able to come to a consensus and finish the ticket. So, and that could be an example of something that you would say for that. And so the result doesn't have to be anything like um, super awesome. So it could be just as simple as we finished the ticket, or we were able to finish the problem, or I was able to get a good grade on the assignment. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant. Which is something that I had that was like I guess when I was new to Star, I felt like I had to have like a really good result. But it can be as simple as just that we finished the ticket or we were able to finish the problem. Um, so my situation was that we had this project that we had to work on together, but we weren't sure if we wanted to use a middleman or if we wanted to go right to our backend service. The action was that we sat down together and we discussed the pros and the cons, and then the result was that we came to a consensus and decided to just have the bot go right to the backend service. Um, and then the other advice I would have is just that to keep in mind that when you're talking about this stuff, you need to talk about what you did specifically. So in my example, the thing that I did specifically was I suggested that we um what I did specifically, so what my action was that I called for a meeting where we discussed the pros and the cons. Um and that's what interviewers are looking for. They were looking for the I, not the we. So just keep that in mind. And in terms of short term, um always study the job description and the company. And I can guarantee that 90% of the time, somewhere along the way, you're going to be asked, why did you apply, or what do you know about blank company? Um, and it's usually in the behavioral. Um, and so the best thing you can do is before your behavioral, just look up something really quick about the company or like its culture or something. Um, and just have something in the back of your mind that you can use to speak towards why you applied. Um, so, for example, that Capital One posting that I had shown all of you, um, if somebody asked me why did I apply to the Capital One, um, I would say something like, and this is actually relevant to the position and true. I would say something like I was impressed by the role because it was rotational and it seems like it was a good way for a young professional to learn more about a lot of different technologies. It could be something as simple as that. Um, and then like if somebody asked me why did I apply to Capital One, um, I would want to say I could say something like I got the impression that the people working at Capital One were very smart and I want to work around people that are smarter than me so that I can learn something. And I also really liked the culture about at Capital One and I noticed that um uh Capital One really um emphasizes or promotes diversity and inclusion and I and that's really important to me because um, I'm interested in learning languages, and I in learning languages has helped me open up to a lot of different worldviews. So you could say something like that, and we probably we kind of all know that a lot of companies are probably just doing these like green things or things like that um like just in the name of it um and just to like look good, but even if you speak towards something like that um about the company, uh it's just that's like good and okay to talk about with the behavioral or the interviewer. So my rule of thumb is to always try to find a reason to say um the people working there look smart and or were smart and I want to work around smart people, or I liked the culture. And those two things have helped have worked well for me. Um, and also before the interview, I would just again review your past experiences and think about how to use star. So if you already made your little personal mythology and wrote it all down, I would just review that. And then another thing that you can do that's really good is just to practice your responses out loud, just to kind of get the kinks out of your responses. And so the other thing you need to think about is how the behavioral is intertwined with the technical. So when you're taking a technical, there are a lot of different things you should think about. So there are four kind of aspects that you can think about. You can think about the coding, the problem solving, the communication, which is the most important, and then the verification. Um, so when you're coding, it's best to be nitpicky with your structure, your naming, your formatting, and the best practices because interviewers are looking at it. But when you're taking the technical, it's not really something that's going to cause you to lose the job offer, but it's something that people are looking at. And so, for example, do you understand the function parameters or do you understand the language? So if I pass in like, so if I'm trying to, um, if I have like an array list of integers and I say like dot add array list dot add and I try to add an integer or a char and I don't catch that, um, the interviewer might be a little bit skeptical about whether I actually understand like the language. Um, or another example is like if I use a function but give the wrong parameters, it might be a little sus. Um, and for problem solving. Um, some questions they're going to be asking are, can you solve the problem even if it wasn't optimal? Can you give the time and space complexity? And are you using the proper data structures? And so it's totally okay to solve the problem even if it wasn't optimal. And something that you should probably do is actually solve the problem with something suboptimal. And then after you do that, it'll be easier to figure out what the optimizations are. So it's better to start coding than this than to spend too much time up front thinking about your optimizations, because you can get really caught up on that, and you don't want to waste like 10 or 15 minutes like trying to think about the optimizations. Um, so the most important is the communication aspect. So it's really good to ask for clarification questions about the problem, and even if this is like a problem, maybe if it's a problem you've seen before, it's probably still a good idea to try to think of just like one question that you can ask. Um, but what they're really looking for is if you understood the question before you actually started attempting it and before you actually started coding it. Um, and it's always good to discuss your solution at a high level before you actually start coding, because then you can show it that you can show your understanding. Um, and something else to keep in mind is whether or not, or is to make sure that you're listening to the interviewer and listening to their hints and the answers that they give to your questions, because they want to make sure that you're kind of like coachable, or that you're easy to work with. So if the interviewer is trying to give you like a hint or something and you just kind of dismiss it, that's not really the best thing to do. Or if they give you like a hint or like answer one of your questions and you're just like, oh yeah, I'll do that later, or like something like that. That's not really like good either. Like you should try to kind of like, you should try to co-work with your interviewer, um, because they are, as much as they are to interview you, they are also there to give you hints and help you out. And nobody really wants to work with somebody who just thinks they know everything. Um, and then do you consider the interviewer's questions? And then something else that's good to do is just to verify the solution before you actually run it. And so what you can do here is just try to think of examples and edge cases, or just test cases to run through the code um, that you wrote before you actually run it. Um, and by doing this, sometimes you can catch bugs, and it's really good if you catch a bug. Um, so yeah. And it's also really okay if you just don't know something and you can just acknowledge it. So, for example, like I had this situation one time when I was using Java and I was using a hash map. And I know how hash maps work, but I'm not super familiar with all the functions that hash maps have in Java. Um, so I was using this hash map in a coding problem in an interview, and um, I knew that the hash map in Java would probably have some sort of function like .has or .contains that um, that takes in a parameter, which would be the key, and then tells you if that key exists in the hash map. But I didn't know like I didn't actually know what the function was called, but I knew it probably existed. So what I did was I just told the interviewer that, hey, I know that there's this function that will tell me if there's a key or not. I don't really know what it's called, but I'm just gonna assume it's called has, and it's totally okay to do that. And so that goes back to the coding aspect here. Do you understand function parameters or do you understand the language? So it's better to acknowledge that you know that something exists, even if you don't know like the name, um, than to not acknowledge it. Because then the interviewer will really know that or really start to think that maybe you don't really understand the language. Um, and so here are just like a few things to talk about to deal with ghosting and rejection. So the first thing to keep in mind is just that it happens to everybody, and it's not really just you, and there could be a lot of different reasons why you got ghosted or rejected. So for example, like I was saying earlier, sometimes hiring managers will just quit like just in the middle of the recruiting season, and throw that can cause your application to get thrown out of the mix. And uh, entry level market is also just like super full of junior software engineers. Um, so it's a major bottleneck. So there are more junior engineers than there are senior engineers, and so it's really hard to find an entry level job sometimes. And the field is becoming more and more popular, so it can be just super competitive. Um, and it's not always you. It's just that there are just a ton of people. Um, but some things you can do are just try to reflect on your strengths and weaknesses and what you did wrong during the interview. And this is a lot easier to do if you had an interview. Reflecting on your strengths and weaknesses is can be a lot easier to do during if you had an interview, because you can think about what you did wrong, or it might be a little bit more clear what you did wrong. um because sometimes you can just send in your resume and it just goes into the void and who knows what happens to it. But if you actually get an interview, um, you can maybe think about what it was that you might have messed up on, and then you can try to improve that for next time. And if you get the offer, then you should celebrate and yay, you made it there. And so sometimes what you have to do is make a hard decision on which offer to take. Um, so levels.fyi and Glassdoor are some really good sites that you can use to help make a decision. So you can use those sites to look up salaries and culture fit. And I would particularly recommend Glassdoor. Levels FYI is good mostly for like tier one companies, tier one tech companies. So you're not gonna find like your local company on levels.fyi. So I would mostly recommend sticking to Glassdoor. Um, if you have multiple offers, then what you can do is you can use them to negotiate a salary at another company. So it gives you a little bit of leverage, and it's also a good idea to ask about benefits, how team matching works, and future sponsorship if you need it. And so what I mean by team matching is how the company matches you, for which team you're going to be working with, um, as you're working there. So for example, like whether you're going to go to like operating systems or backend services, or like a specific team, or which specific team maybe within backend services or something like that. And the other thing to remember is that you can have a great experience at a smaller and more unknown company and have a really bad experience at a big name tech company, or vice versa. And you should ultimately do whatever you think is going to make you the most happy and whatever is the best for yourself. And some people will go. I know Fang is kind of hyped up a lot by a lot of people, but some people have really bad experiences at Fang companies. And you can have a much happier life at a company that is not as known or as hyped up. And a lot of companies that aren't as hyped up as Fang companies are still extremely good. So, just do what's best for you, not what would not what other people think is the best. And so that is pretty much the end. And I just have a few slides I'd like to go over for some really good resources that I think you would all be able to benefit from. So if you want some technical interview practice, I would recommend this. I'd recommend this list called the Blind 75. And so these are 75 LeetCode questions that test data structures and algorithms fundamentals, and that are commonly seen in actual interviews and online assessments. So like I was saying before, I saw that threesome problem, and that's one of the problems on this list here. And one of the reasons I knew about threesome was because of this list. So this is a very good list. So interview.io, this is not something I've used, but it's a service that provides anonymous technical mock interviews with actual software engineers. I haven't looked into this super deeply, so I'm actually not sure if this is free or not. But uh, this sounds like something very good if you can't find someone in person to do a mock interview with. If you want behavioral interview practice, the best thing I can recommend is practice using STAR, and I would also look at this list of common behavioral questions. And this list in particular is very, very good because it gives you sample responses for uh, 10 different questions. So you can also use alumni connections. So there's this service, there's an alumni service that to me seems very underutilized, or at least I never hear people talking about it. But this is a network of alums from UAlbany that work at companies, and you can use them to grow your network, and they will also give you resume critique, and you can also use these people to do mock interviews with. So this is something I would definitely recommend. And I've actually used it before. Um, and if you need something to kind of test out resume parsing to see like how far or to see what a resume parser would pick up on your resume, there's this tool right here that I would recommend. And so Lever or Lever is a commonly used parser, and this tool uses Lever's parser. So I think it's kind of fun and kind of cool to see what could get picked up on your resume. For finding jobs, so these are all the platforms that I mentioned before, and so I just have their links here. Oh, actually, I didn't mention AngelList, but this is a spot to find startups. Um, so there isn't really a lot for new grad or interns in my experience, but if you are looking for startups, then this might be a good spot for you. Something else I didn't really mention before was Glassdoor. Um, but this is really useful for finding jobs and looking up salaries. And employees also provide reviews on the companies and their experience with the interviews for the company. And so this is a really good way to figure out if the company is a good fit for you. And it's also a good way to kind of help cram or prepare for an interview at a company. And then here's a link, or here's a Discord invite to that server or to that community I was talking about, cscareers.dev. I'd recommend joining that. And then I also just want to acknowledge Handshake. So if we have anybody in here that is not familiar with Handshake, so this is a job board for students, and so there's like a UAlbany, or I don't really know how to consider it, but you can, I guess like every UAlbany student, I guess technically has an account. But this is another good way to find jobs, and so I'd recommend that. Canvas is another job portal that some companies use. It can be useful, but it is probably not as good as LinkedIn in terms of saturation. And so these are the tools for cold emailing that I went over earlier. And so right here I have some different templates for resumes that you can use. And so these are all from a resume workshop that I signed up for but was not able to make. But so this workshop though was a crossover between an employee from levels.fyi, which I talked about a little bit before, and a YouTuber called Mayuko, who does a lot of tech related and career advice videos. But I would say that the templates here are definitely good to follow, and they also have some exercise sheets that you can use to help develop your resume. And yeah, so I believe that is it. Oops. Yeah, that's it. So I am available to answer questions. If anybody has any.
What was a website that you said can tell you what company or what LeetCode questions the company uses?
So that is cscareers.dev. So that's a website. So if you search in, oh, it's not the Discord invite, but if you type in, if you go to this URL cscareers.dev, so I'll put that in the thing here. There you go. So if you go there, they might have that tool there. But on that website, you should be able to get a whatchamacallit, a invite to their Discord server, and in their Discord server, they have a bot that will uh give you these problems. Um, you might have to go into their Discord server to get those problems, but yeah,
Gotcha.
hope that helps. Uh, but yeah, and yeah, so I'm available for any and all questions. So,
Hey, how you doing?
hello, hi.
Um, in your personal opinion, which one would you value more if you're an employee, internships or side projects?
Definitely. So I would value an internship over a side project, and that's because it's real world work experience. So I know that that person was probably working with somebody, um, and um, just like got a lot of experience using some sort of technology, and got work experience. So like probably working like a 9 to 5 type of deal, which is good. Um, but if you have um, if you have a side project, definitely put it on your resume. Um, Side projects are really good because they show that like you're passionate about like the field. Um, so it's something that you should it's something that you should work on, or try to like you should definitely try to have side projects. But there are people that have no side projects but do have experience, like job experience or work experience, and are able to get a job. Um, and just because you don't have any internship experience or job experience doesn't mean that you can't get a job either. So, um, like if you have no internship experience but you have like a lot of cool um if you have a lot of experience with side projects, then that's also very good too. Um, and you can learn a lot from side projects too. But um, companies typically value internships over side projects. Um, but yeah, do you have any questions about what I said, or?
If it's okay, may I ask another question?
Yes, yes, please.
Um, what would you like? What is a high number of side projects? Like we're talking about like 5, 6, 10, 15 plus. Like
Yeah,
what would be a good number?
like 3 solid side projects is good. Like 3 solid ones. So, if you're doing like if you're majoring in computer science, let's say, and you want like a then something good to work on might be like a actual software engineering project or something full stack. And um so a full stack project would include some sort of back end service, probably a database, and then some sort of front end. So if you did all of that, then that I would consider that like a very solid side project, um, for software engineering. Um, if I wanted to do game development, if I for game development, I don't necessarily need to have it be full stack and that it has like a database and a backend. But if I made something like, say, I made like Snake, like the game Snake, or like Space Invaders or something, or even like Pong as a side project, uh, that's still like pretty solid. Um, and um, yeah, so that's what I would consider like something like a good side project. But you really only need like 3 or so, and you can get by with like 2 as well. Um, but just 2 that like show like a 2 or 3 that show like a good like a very solid or like strong understanding of like um of uh of work, or understanding of a technology. And something else that's really good is if you like um you if you like also like deploy like a project. So if I was working on like a software engineering project that was full stack, if I like deployed my backend on like AWS, or um and then hosted like my front end, like on Netlify, which is um a website that will host like web pages for you. That would also be really good. Um, but even like if they're not like that, so I mean you should put on like any side project that you have. Um, so just anything to show that like you have some sort of passion um about the field. Any follow up questions or?
Yo, if you did the 311 interpreter, put that on there. I know a lot of people dropped that last semester, so
Yeah.
if you finished that, put that on.
Yeah, I've heard secondhand about that interpreter.
I mean, that thing was a work, but actually, that does raise a good question. What about school projects? I mean, would you consider that a good thing just to put on GitHub? Be like, hey, this is what I did.
Yes, yeah, do it. Even if it's a school project, you can still put it on. Um, and especially if it's like a group project, that's also very good to put on. And I've put group projects on my resume. And I think they're a good thing to speak towards because you're working with people, and that's valuable work experience. So just because it's a school project doesn't mean it's anything to scoff at. Um, Companies do love to see that you have interest outside of school too. Um, so uh, it's definitely fine. It's definitely fine to put school projects on, but um, if somebody asks you, like if this was like for school or for like, or if this was like outside of school, um, they'll be really pleased to hear that it was outside of school. Um, and certain companies will value outside of school projects more than others. So I've had experiences with companies that haven't asked about it or shown any sort of preference over the two, but there are other companies that will. So an example is this local company called Kitware, that's known for making CMake. Uh, I've I know that like they've expressed particular or like explicit interest in projects outside of school. Um, so yeah, so some companies kind of value them or weigh it a bit more differently or weigh them differently than others. But I think it's fine to put a school project on your resume. Um, yeah. Any follow ups or? And I'll also post this slide deck um, in the workshop channel so that you can all use these links too. And I'll do that at the end here.
I also want to point out that the reaching out slides, it does work because I've done it personally. Except I would use different words to intro, but that's fine. This is his workshop. You know what I mean? If it works for him, it works for him. But
yeah,
those slides definitely work.
Yeah.
Also, you'd actually be surprised if you would literally just ask for something, how many people are actually willing to give it. Because a lot of people have the same mentality that you do. It's like, oh, if I ask them, they're just going to deny me, so I'm just not going to do it anyway. Just do it. Literally.
Yeah.
The worst that's going to happen is either A, they're going to say, I'm too busy this week, and blow you off entirely, or not answer your email. And the best thing that can happen to you is you get a talk with them, and you can talk about literally whatever you want. So.
Yeah. You don't even have to talk about yeah, I mean you don't even have to talk about a job in particular. If you see somebody on LinkedIn and you have like similar interests or similar background, and you just want to connect with them, then definitely reach out. But yeah, you'd be surprised that some people are more willing to help than you may think. But yeah, does anyone have any other questions? And if you think of any other questions later on, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to help. I enjoy like helping people with this type of thing. I'll try to read this. All right. Yeah, so if anybody thinks of any questions, feel free to ask, but if there's nothing else. Oh, you can question? Oh yeah, what's your question about you can? Oh, how did I make contact? So like, oh, what was my experience? Okay. So all right, so there's this portal you go to that it brings you to, and so I'm pretty sure I have the link in here. All right. So you go to this page, and there's get advice or give advice. So I'll say get advice, so I can log in with my net ID. Oh, interesting. Give me 1 second. I have to get my password off screen. But basically you log into this and it gives you a list of employers, I believe. And I'll just show you in a second. But then you just pick what you want. Like you pick the employer. And it will like show you like a list of people that work there, and then you literally just set up an appointment based on your own schedule, and then you just talk to them. So just give me 1 second. All right. Oh, gotta log in with Duo. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. All right. So the advisors are people that you can meet with. So you can click it on advisors here.
How do you get to that point? I have an overhead tab that's about career services, events, network groups, students, community. Or do you have to register?
I don't think you just log in with your UAlbany account, so I don't think you
connect with an alum.
Yeah, try clicking on that. Oh, here, I'll put this link that I used. Yes, sir, MacBook gang.
Cringe.
Whoa.
Okay.
Whoa.
Yeah, there we go.
Alright. So, yeah, I hope that works. But, so, what you have to do, you just click on advisors here. Okay, and so, I think you have to, like, go through some things. Like, you can, like, give some information about yourself or something. Like, if I go to dashboard here, maybe? Whatever. No, it's not. Oh, it's my dashboard. Okay. Okay, view profile? Yeah, okay, so I think like the first time you log in, it asks you for like information, so it'll ask you like what sectors you want to work in, what locations you'd want to work in. I don't know why I Oh, right, that's okay. And then what employers you would want to work for. And then based on all of that, it finds your quote unquote advisors and it gives you a rating of how much of a match they are. So like this guy works at Microsoft and he went to UAlbany and he was also like a computer science major. Like this this guy has been like in my dashboard or like my list of advisors here from like the first day I signed up on this. Um, but yeah, you can just like find people. So I guess so you have this like yeah, you have this thing right here, so you can search by employer, you can search by location, field of study. But at the time, I was looking in particular for people from the Janelle Group, which is a local company. Um, so uh, so Kamal was the person I met with. So I searched for Janelle Group. I found this person. So I click on their name, and so the services they provide are looks like resume and CV critique, and then mock interviews. Um, and so you choose what you want, and so like I picked mock interview, and then you literally just like so I guess these people give their availability, um, and then you can literally just pick whatever works for you. Uh, so you pick your time slot, you click continue, um, and then you send a request, and then the person just has to approve the request, and then like you're good to go. But yeah, that's it. Like that's how you do it. Um, so like if I wanted to talk to this Microsoft guy, so this guy does career conversation, informational interview, resumes and CVs, mock interviews. Um, so this guy's been at Microsoft for like forever. Literally since 1996, this guy's been working at Microsoft. So if you want a job at Microsoft, this is a really good guy to talk to. A really good connection, and you could possibly get this guy to give you a recommendation when you apply, um, which would be really good. So you can say resume or CV, mock interview, career conversation, informational interview. Again, just pick a time. Looks okay. So then it tells you right here. This guy has had 35 consultations. Oh, 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 these are some interviews or some reviews. Oh, there's Josh. Hi, Josh. Are you with us still? Yes,
Yeah,
you are.
you're still here.
Yeah, yeah. I actually during my freshman year, I spoke with him. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
like the reason why I wrote it is because I thought it was a mandatory. That's why I wrote the comment.
Yeah.
I thought it was a mandatory. Yeah, but like, he was pretty helpful.
Yeah, that's cool. Cool. But yeah, that's UCAN. So, uh, yeah. Um,
Actually, how? I guess you used it, right? You personally, how did you actually find it? Like when you actually spoke to that woman in the Janelle group.
um, like, did I find it useful?
Yeah, like what did you gain from it? That you could, that you would spread the word.
Yeah. So, what helped me? Oh, okay. So, all right. So I signed up for mock interview, but we actually didn't do a mock interview. Like she just spent the hour just like giving me advice for like for like my career pretty much. Um which was good. So basically what she did was she gave me a rundown of like things to expect for when I apply to local companies in particular. Like she was saying a lot about how like any local company is going to be sane and not expect you to know like heaps or like binary search trees like inside and out. Like she said that mostly like if you apply to like a smaller or local company, like um they're mostly gonna expect you to do stuff with like strings or like arrays, or like things like that. So she gave me advice on what interviews would be like. Um, she offered to help me get an internship at that company that I was looking at, the Janelle Group. Um, and she gave me some resources to help be or to become better software engineer. Like she recommended like a book that I could read. Um, but so for me, like all I got out of it was just that advice. Um, and I didn't really utilize like her connection very well, but I imagine that you could use these connections pretty well. So, um, like you probably could have asked that Carl guy for like a recommendation or something. Um, if you apply to Microsoft. But that's like what I got out of it though. It was just like interview advice and just like okay, you can read this book. Uh, yeah, that's pretty much what I got out of it. Um, but so I would say all in all I had like a medium level experience, but you could probably get some of these people to give you like really good recommendations or something. And also uh, there's like one of the people from the Janelle group that I just saw by looking now was the CGO, the chief growth officer. Um, and I mean, if that guy really liked you, I mean, he has some stake in the company, so like he could go to the recruiter and be like, hey, I like this guy a lot. I think he would do really well, and that we should hire him. Um, so it's probably a little. It's probably a mix of what you put in is what you get out, and also your luck. So I hope that answers your question. All right. Um, yeah. Any other questions? I'll give you all like a minute to think of anything.
You were talking about our bot, weren't you?
What's that?
You were talking about our bot, weren't you, Tony?
Wait, when?
You use Slack instead of just regularly.
Oh no, no, that was actually something. Yeah.
Bro, I'm like, yo, you talking about us? Fuck Duffy.
No, I actually worked on a Slack bot for an internship.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions, then I think we are good to end the workshop. Also, I know this was advertised at going no more than an hour, and obviously it's been 2 hours. I actually didn't really think that I would have this much to say, but yeah. So sorry about that. But thank you everybody for coming. But yeah, I'll give you like final chance for any final questions. Elon Musk is typing. Let's see. Thank you, Tony. You're welcome. All right, so I'll assume that we're all good. But if anybody thinks of any questions after the workshop, feel free to reach out. But yeah, so thanks everybody for coming. So the next IEEE event we have is going to be tomorrow at 8 p.m. We are going to be doing side project development night. The other really important event that I also want to make sure that you all know about is that we have, well, actually 2 events. So we have Brian is going to be giving a workshop next week on imposter syndrome. And that goes really hand in hand with this workshop, because a lot of times you'll see other people that are doing amazing things in computer science or in your like classes, and you'll be thinking, wow, I'm not good enough. And you can start to think about this like when you're applying for jobs too, if you are getting ghosted or getting rejected. So definitely come out to Brian's workshop next week. Next week we also have an event, or we have a company coming to give a talk. The company is Kitware. They'll be coming on September 23rd, which I believe is a Thursday. And Brian's workshop is on a Wednesday. And so what Kitware will be doing is they'll be advertising a program that they have for where anybody in the program will get a 100% free master's education while also working at Kitware. So definitely check that out. And Matt's workshop will be in 2 weeks. So yeah, towards the end of September. But yes, but yeah, those are my updates. But yeah, thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you all got I hope you all got some value out of this workshop, and I hope it all helped. But again, feel free to reach out. Don't hesitate. So, but yeah, thanks again, everybody, and good night. Bye.
Night, everyone.